Hello there, and welcome to my very first episode of this knitting podcast. I don't know what I'm going to call it. Maybe you can help me name it once you find out a little bit more about me. But I'll tell you just a little bit. My name is Charity, and I am a knitter coming to you from the lovely state of North Carolina. We are very country here. I have quite a bit of a country accent, so if you're into that kind of thing, you can stay. If I aggravate you, you can go. But I love hearing about knitting from people from all walks of life, places all over the world. So I'm coming to you from here. Again, my name is Charity. I've been knitting for about 2.5 years. So I am a relatively new knitter. If you're here watching me, please don't expect to get expert tips on knitting. I am no expert. I do this for enjoyment, and the purpose in this podcast is to simply share what I'm knitting and to develop a community of knitters where we can share and chat, and you can share with me what you're knitting. You can share with me your podcast. I would just love some interaction from people who love to knit. Believe it or not a lot of people that I know enjoy knitting. I've actually tried to teach a couple of my family members to knit, and that was during the pandemic, so it was a little bit tricky because we had to do it virtually, and it didn't last very long. So I don't know very many people who do knit. So the purpose in this is just to reach out to people and just communicate and collaborate and just have a good time. So again, I've been knitting for about 2.5 years, and it has become just a huge passion of mine. I really enjoy it, and I really enjoying watching other people who knit and learning from them. YouTube has just been an amazing platform. That's how I learned how to knit, and I feel like I have some friends on the internet who can teach me things, and I love just hearing and learning about what everyone else is doing. I will say that I didn't start with knitting in terms of yarn crafting. I actually started with crocheting as a part of a project that I was doing with my students. I'm a teacher, by the way. Years and years ago. I'm kind of hinting about my age a little bit, but it was a long time ago. And back then I had an aunt who knew how to crochet. And for some reason my class was doing some sort of community service project where we wanted to do something for the homeless. So I think I saw this on the news, but it wasn't my idea. But the idea was to create a sleeping mat for someone who was homeless, who needed it, in the shelter or what have you. And the way to do that was by creating yarn out of grocery bags, cutting up the grocery bags, tying it together to create a yarn, and then crocheting it together. I knew no idea how to crochet, but I knew I wanted to do something really cool, and then my aunt could teach me. So my students and I, we collected the bags, we cut it, we tied it together at school, and then I went home and tried to learn how to crochet. And that was a huge disaster. I never ended up finishing the mat, but I knew it did pique my interest in the yarn world and in the crochet world. So I knew it was something that I wanted to pick back up later. Fast forward to, let's see how many years. Maybe about 11 years later. It was before the pandemic. I wanted to try crocheting again. So I went to YouTube and found some great tutorials, and actually a person who's no longer with us, but she really got me intrigued and interested in crochet, and her name was Melanie Ham. She passed away just about a year ago, and I was really sad to hear that. She was such a beautiful lady, had such a beautiful spirit, and her tutorials on crochet were amazing. So I started to make some hats using her tutorials, and mostly, you know, I just made hats and then a few blankets. And I saw someone knitting in my school. I was walking by and I had only been crocheting, and I noticed that she was knitting and that she was using needles, and there were 2 of them, and that was very intriguing to me. So I asked her what she was doing and how to knit, and she wasn't very interested in sharing. She was a little bit, but anyway, I hope I don't offend anybody by telling that story. I'm just thinking, anywho, it made me very interested. So fast forward to the pandemic, I was bored, you know, I was crocheting and I kept seeing knitting videos. So I watched just a tutorial on basic knitting, and I didn't even have needles at the time. So I took 2 straws, I believe I had, and some yarn. And I was like, is this something that I could do? Because the lady that I saw knitting just made it seem like so above me. So I thought, is this something that I could do? So yeah, you know, I learned the knit stitch, and I'm like, oh, this is really cool. You know, I like the idea of this. So I head to, I believe it was Michael's or Hobby Lobby, one of them, and got a knitting kit, and I just took off from there. Marley Bird, I think I watched one of her beginning knitter tutorials, and I made a little yellow swatch, and it was terrible, but it was all downhill from there. That's all I wanted to do. You can consider it downhill. You can consider it downhill or uphill, but that's all I wanted to do. So I knit a few things for myself. I knit, let's see, socks, and then I knit some things for the family. A Christmas tree skirt, that was really, really cool. Christmas stockings to hang on the mantle. And then I knew that my ultimate goal was to start knitting sweaters. And I knew that if I could make a sock or a hat, then I could certainly do a sweater. So I felt like it was stair steps. I had to climb my way up because my ultimate goal was to make a sweater, which I am wearing. So I'll just jump right into what I am wearing. This is the No Frills sweater by designer Petite Knit. And I found this pattern on Ravelry. It's so hard to say, Ravelry, which is where I pretty much find all of my patterns now, because Ravelry can be amazing, just so that you can see how designs look on people that have similar body types to you. You can get free patterns, you can get paid for patterns. If you're watching this podcast, you are probably very familiar with Ravelry, so I'll stop talking about it now. But anyway, that's where I got this pattern. And I thought it was a great beginner sweater pattern to knit, because it's a raglan, which is very basic. You start from top down, and I knew how to do increases, I knew how to do decreases, and I knew that's really all that was required for making this sweater. I knew how to pick up stitches, you know, all those things because of my experience with knitting socks. So, and that's what I did, and it turned out great. I knit this sweater with some yarn that I found online that I've seen lots of people referencing, and the first one is Drops Flora, because the sweater pattern calls for you to hold 2 strands together. So I chose Drops Flora, which is 65% wool and 35% alpaca. It feels very soft to the touch in the ball, but when you actually start knitting with it, it feels kind of rough. It's not very drapey. So thank God I also got Drops Kid Silk Mohair. And paired together, this is dreamy, a dreamy combination. I love how the fabric just drapes on me. It's not stiff. Just love everything about this combination. And because it is mohair, it is slightly itchy, but it's something that I can handle, I can tolerate. I know that mohair isn't something that everyone can tolerate, but it actually feels okay on my skin. It took me about 3 months to knit this sweater because I don't think I've shared yet, but I have 2 children. I have an 8-year-old and a 10-month-old, and of course a husband. So I have a family to take care of. So I can't just sit and knit all day like I want to. I started this sweater at the very beginning of August this summer, and I finished it mid-October. So that's September, October, all of August. That's about 3 months. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it took a long time, but because you're using just the small weight of yarn with the fingering and the mohair, it's a sweater that does take a while. But I'm very proud of it and how it turned out. Very easy to knit. If anyone is looking for a beginner-friendly sweater pattern, this is definitely the one. Again, it's called the No Frills Sweater Pattern by Petite Knit. Her instructions were beautiful. I enjoyed them. They're very descriptive, more sentence-like. The only part that was a little bit daunting for me was the realization that there were German short rows included. Because I had knit a lot of socks, I didn't realize that I had actually been doing some short rows. But when I heard people say short rows, it was a little scary. So what I did was went to YouTube and watched a couple of tutorials, and I loved it. I love short rows now. It was amazing. I feel like it's just magical because, and this is what I love about people who design sweaters, they're just brilliant. They know that your body is not just a flat shape in the back, from your neck to your back, but it kind of curves a little bit. So the German short rows allow more fabric to lay over your body, forming a better fit. And so the top of this sweater goes up higher than the front of this sweater, which is a more flattering. I'm sorry I keep doing this. Anybody remember that movie, Pippi Longstocking? I feel like I look like her when I do that. Anyway, German short rows are amazing. I will forever look for patterns that use them. So that was probably the most complicated thing in this whole pattern, was the German short rows, which turned out to be a breeze. And as I said before, I think I knit this sweater exactly to pattern because it being the first sweater that I had made for myself, I don't think I mentioned that I practiced and made a baby sweater for my daughter, which turned out great. But this being the first one that I did for myself, I wanted to see how it would fit, just knitting it exactly the way the designer prescribed. I knit the size large, and I think my measurements at the time were around like 42 inches across my bust. And I knew that this sweater was designed to have about 6 inches of positive ease, and I wanted it to be roomy, but I did lose weight in the time that I knit this. So it is definitely oversized. And my gauge when I knit it was actually smaller than the pattern called for, which tends to be the case with things that I knit. So the fact that it's still oversized is just kind of a testament to my health and how I'm getting that back on track, and I've lost weight. But I actually do love the fit of this sweater. And I believe that's all I'm going to say about it. No frill sweater, Petite Knit. If you want to make a sweater, you want to try doing it for the first time, this is a great pattern. Very lovely. So the next thing I want to share, I guess we can call this a finished object, is a hat, and this is a hat that I made for my daughter. She's 10 months now, and I think this is going to be great for the winter time, although she hates to put it on. She's hilarious. When I try this on her, she's ripping it off. But this hat was a free pattern that I also found on Ravelry, and it was suggested by a wonderful podcaster. I believe the podcast is called Knitting Traditions. Amazing woman, beautiful woman. But she suggested a pattern called, well, actually, I don't remember the name of the pattern, but it's from Purl Soho. I'll link the pattern in the description box. But it's a basic ribbed hat. It's 1x1 rib. You cast on the desired amount of stitches, and you start at the bottom, knit, 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 and then you start decreasing towards the top. And then you close it together at the end. This actually didn't take me very long to knit, maybe less than a week. And I thought it would take longer because I don't usually enjoy knitting ribbing, but I guess just knitting nothing but ribbon, I got the hang of it, and it was addicting, and I finished it very quickly. The yarn that I used for this hat was actually from a subscription that I used to have from Yarnable. If you haven't heard about Yarnable, it is one of those subscription companies where they will mail you a little goodie box of yarn every month. And I say I used to have a subscription because I started getting it before I got pregnant, and then when I got pregnant, I didn't have time to knit, so the yarn was just kind of piling up, so I canceled the prescription. But the yarn that they send is beautiful. I opted for the fingering weight yarn, and they would just send me a surprise every month, and I think the yarn composition is 75% superwash merino and then 25% nylon. Very soft, very drapey. Every time I make something with the yarn, I love it. It does grow, which is a great thing because this hat was way too small for my daughter because, again, I am a tight knitter, and for some reason I'm reluctant to go up a needle size. I don't know why. So my things can be tighter. Anyway, with blocking, this stretches out very beautifully, and it now fits her head. However, I have learned that when you aggressively block something to increase the width, the length kind of will shorten, which makes sense. So I don't think that my daughter's gonna let me fold it up like this, have a folded brim, because she doesn't like that. And it's too short and tight on her head. So what I think I'll do is add a little pom-pom and let it be somewhat slouchy. I think she can tolerate that a little bit better. But again, this is a pattern from Purl Soho, a basic ribbed beanie, and I will put the name of it or the link for it in the description box. Okay, the next thing I wanted to share is a pair of socks. Socks really became my passion when I started knitting. I watched tutorials from the Crazy Sock Lady. She is a genius when it comes to teaching people how to knit socks on various needle sizes and lengths. And so socks are probably what I have knit the most. And so I still always try to have a pair of socks on the needles so that if I'm at a doctor's appointment or a game and my son is currently not playing in the soccer game, or at work when I'm standing up and greeting students in the morning and I need something to do with my hands, I like to have a pair of socks on the needles. So if this yarn looks familiar, it's because it is the same yarn that I used to make my no frills sweater. And I've knit so many socks at this point, I don't need to look at a pattern if I just want a basic sock. So for this one, I decided I wanted it to be ribbed because the fit of a ribbed sock, oh my gosh, I love it, love it. So the cuff is a 2x2 rib, which I think is my favorite way to do a cuff. And then the the leg of the sock is a 3x1 rib. So I knit 3 and purled 1. I always cast on 64 stitches for my socks. That just seems to work for me. I did a regular heel flap and gusset for these, and then knit the foot. These should be finished because I've actually already casted on the other sock. But I think the reason that I didn't finish these was because I don't really have a clear reason. I mean, I've already knit the toe. I don't know. But I'll finish them. I think it does help to go ahead and cast on the second sock for me before I completely finish the first sock so that I don't let the project linger and actually get them finished. But these have been a slow knit for me because like I said, I usually just knit on these when I'm on the go, mostly when I'm at work during that 45 minutes of greeting students in the morning. So it's taken me a long time. And it's funny because the kids are very intrigued by my knitting, and they ask me all the time, are you still making those socks? And I'm like, yeah, I'm still making these socks. Are you still asking me if I'm making these socks? And at this point, they've asked me to knit them things. And I wish I could. I really do. I wish I could just crank things out faster, but that's not why we knit. It's the joy of knitting. And people who do knit quickly and they just crank things out, I'm very amazed because I don't think I'll ever be one of those people. So anyway, maybe these will be done by Christmas time. I don't know. The last thing that I wanted to share was the sweater that I'm currently working on for myself. So it will be the second sweater that I've knitted for myself. Woohoo! I can't wait. I can't wait to just have like a wardrobe full of sweaters. And I'm imagining them on a rack, but they need to be folded. I just can't wait. So I love this one. And the next one, I decided I wanted to have a different construction. So this one was a top-down raglan, and I saw someone wearing, I think her name is Aro. I found her on Instagram, and she also has a wonderful podcast, Ara Knits and Pearls, I believe is the name of her accounts. But she was wearing this, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's beautiful. It is a drop sweater construction, so that's my different. You know, I wanted something different but still wonderful. And without further ado, it is the Clove sweater. The Clove sweater. Sorry about the plastic. This is a little hack if you're interested. I put this in sleeve protectors because my baby, I don't know if she doesn't want me knitting or, I mean, she's teething, but she will take and literally eat my pattern paper. So I put these in sleeve protectors to try to avoid that. This is the Clove sweater. The designer is Rachel Kurihara. And I know it's not in color, but just look at that. It's a cropped sweater. It has the drop shoulder, like I mentioned. It has a little split hem that you can't see on the side, but to me it just looks like so modern and so chic. And the color that the model is wearing is actually similar to the color that I chose, and I'll show you my swatch. It looks kind of like an oatmeal color, but I think it's actually called lamb. And so I wanted to pick a color that was similar to what she was wearing because I thought it looked really cool. But the yarn that Rachel suggests is 100% cashmere. But I opted for this yarn. and it's a DK weight, just like the pattern does suggest. But this is from Berroco, and it's one of the new yarns in their fall line for this year, which is 2022, and it's called Renew. And just by the title, you're like, Renew. Yes, it's recycled yarn, and it says it's recycled and sustainable. So that's really cool. And it actually is very, very soft to the touch. And the yarn composition is 35% viscose, 30% wool, 30% nylon, and 5% cashmere. And when I got this yarn, I actually went to my local yarn store and I asked the owner there to suggest a yarn for me, because I feel like someone who owns a yarn store is going to be well more versed in yarn types and could find me something that aligned with what the pattern suggested. And I did mention to her, well, cashmere must be expensive. I mean, they don't call it cashmere for nothing. Sorry, that was a bad joke. But cashmere has to be expensive, right? And so she suggested this yarn. This yarn is $13.50 a ball, but it still feels very, very soft and very, very lovely on the skin. So I don't think that it's like a cheap yarn or anything. And now that I've picked it, I've heard some people referencing it, and I feel like it's a good one for me. But I think that she may have suggested it because it is probably cheaper than purchasing yarn that's 100% cashmere. And I did tell her that I also wanted a yarn that would keep its shape after blocking, because of course this one grew, which is why it's also a little bit more oversized. And I want this sweater to be more fitting, just to see how that works for my body. And so she suggested this one. So maybe with blocking it won't grow too much. When I did my swatch, as usual, I knit it more tightly than the pattern suggested. But instead of going up a needle size, I decided to stick with the same needle size. And then I figure, because blocking does help fabric to grow, if I need it to be just slightly bigger, I can do that with blocking. But I don't want it to grow too much because I do want a more form-fitted sweater. So that's the swatch. And I showed the yarn, I do believe, and now I'll show you my progress. And I'm going to try to be very diligent about not giving too much information about this pattern, because it is a paid-for pattern and I wouldn't want to take anything away from the amazing designer. So this is what it looks like. Let's see, I'm gonna hold it up. So this that I'm holding closest to me is the back panel, and then in the front here is the left shoulder. And that's how this one starts. You knit it flat, starting from the back, and it is a top-down sweater construction. And once you finish the back panel, you then pick up stitches and knit the shoulders. You'll join those together and knit the front panel, and I believe knit more of the shoulder, place the stitches on hold, and then for the arms, and then knit the body. So for this one, I am knitting a size small, because when I did my measurements this time, I was measuring closer to around 36 inches around the bust, and for 6 to 10 inches of positive ease, a size small seemed like more of what I needed to do this time. So I cannot wait. I cannot wait for this to look more like a sweater, and just to see how it fits and how it works up. I'm really happy that I chose a different sweater construction this time, so that I can figure out what works best for me. Raglans are wonderful, love them. This one is a drop shoulder, and who knows, maybe I'll just have lots of different kinds of sweaters in my wardrobe once I get going on knitting lots of sweaters. But I will say that I am a person who, when I go in the store, I like to get multiple things in various colors. So I probably will knit another one of these in a different color. And if I love this one, another one of these in a different color, because I just enjoy, like if I love something, I love it and I want lots of it. So we'll see. But I think that is all I wanted to share about this sweater. Again, this is the Clove sweater by Rachel Kurihara, and I'm pretty sure I'm saying her name wrong, her last name wrong. But anyway, this is a pattern also on Ravelry. And that is all that I have to share with you today. Thank you for watching me fumble through this first podcast episode. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I hope to hear what you have to say in the comments. Please be kind, but most knitters are. And I look forward to sharing more with you in the future. Thanks for watching. Bye.